The Carbon series is where MSI usually gets serious. It has to be the best gamer out there, be completely enthusiast friendly, and support about the most eccentric configuration your wallet can afford. It's a good intro, it's a great intro, but this one is different. With the MPG Z590 gaming carbon Wi-Fi, MSI decided to up the ante quite a bit. A brand new cooling design, more features than ever seen before in this series, and a heavily upgraded power delivery. The Carbon has decided to carbonize its competition. Carbonize. Because carbonize has the same root as carbon. So the MPG series is usually the mid to higher gaming tier, and Carbon its most balanced and best-selling motherboard in that series. It specs the most amount of feature in its price range, but usually manages to remain in acceptable budget constraints. Well, until today, because the very first thing you're gonna see here is that the Carbon is leaving the gaming-focused market tier and entering the more features expensive and premium enthusiast tier. It received severe upgrades on different fronts and has really little to do with its predecessor, its Z490 variant. This said, its pricing has also been somewhat upgraded, going from $260 on its previous iteration all the way up to, well, a not so light $250. So $80 premium going from gen to gen. And the whole question is, are they worth it? Well, that's what we're gonna try to answer today. Starting with the obvious. We're dealing with a 6-layered PCB ATX motherboard, exactly what I expected out of a PCIe 4.0 enabled motherboard, because it will both strengthen the PCIe signal integrity as well as improve the VRM heat dissipation. CPU socket wise, we got our LGA 1200 CPU socket, able to support both 10th and 11th generation of Intel Core CPUs, and note that only the 11th gen come with PCIe 4.0 lanes, which has its importance since this is where the board PCIe 4.0 abilities will be sourced from. Now, small reminder, PCIe 4.0 standard outputs twice the bandwidth available on PCIe 3.0 standard, going from 1 GB per second per lane to 2 GB per second per lane, obviously offering a direct and severe performance gain on your day-to-day computing. VRM-wise, well, this is where the Carbon really starts to show how different it is from its previous iteration. We have 1875 amps power stages, 16 of which are CPU-centric. That is 1200 amps worth of power to juice out every single hertz of potential out of your processor. That's quite the big jump coming from the Z490 Carbon 720 amps, which was already quite a bit. So the whole question is, why that much? Why that many amps? And as we've seen on other Z590 motherboards, the answer is simple. First, marketing, and two, thermals. Using a fraction of a 75 amps power stage doesn't heat nearly as much as using the full load of a 50 amps power stages, so it stays much cooler even in an extreme overclocking scenario. Also, having that many power stages helps to spread the load amongst a wider area, keeping our VRM cooler for a longer amount of time. Add to that an imposing, impressive, unprecedented 2 stages heat pipe linked heat sinks, and you got about the coolest VRM of that class you can hope to have. MSI totally rethought its VRM blocks, showing off more radiating surface and allowing more airflow to evacuate excess heat. It is just pure and distilled genius if I have ever seen any. And well, it looks so good. It has this mineral aesthetic to it that I absolutely love, and it really affects the overall desirability of the board. Finally, the blocks have that double contact design, which will be harvesting heat both on chokes and power stages in the same time. And the result is simply impressive. With a tortured and overclocked 10-core i9 processor at full synthetic load, the VRM didn't go beyond 60 degrees Celsius, and believe me, I tried everything. And to be clear, that much stress is not realistic. On your day-to-day gaming, computing, blendering, you'll have much less stress on your processor for less amount of time, so I do expect your VRM to stay below 50 degrees Celsius. In short, MSI clearly rethought its old thermal design because it did have some issues in the past with it, and I think that they wanted to make a point to the industry. But most importantly, it will reflect positively both on the stability and the durability of your build overall. So yeah, that is my very first expensive and engineering kudos to MSI for this. Memory-wise, the MPG Z590 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi supports up to 128GB of DDR4 RAM in a dual-channel configuration. It is overclockable up to a whopping 5333 MHz, which is 333 MHz more than its Z490 predecessor. Obviously, great performance gain just there, but just to be honest and clear, those kind of higher clocks will only be able to be obtained or obtainable if you use a single memory stick, like higher density, expensive memory sticks. The more you're going to populate your memory DIMMs, the lower your RAM clock will be able to go. For example, if you go for 4 memory sticks, you will not be able to surpass anything above 4 gigahertz, which is, I'm sorry to say, already a lot. Staying in the memory, our Z590 Gaming Carbon supports up to 3 M.2 solid-state drive sticks, and there is a lot to unpack here. Depending on which processor you decide to couple this board with, configuration and performances will differ. With the 10th generation PCIe 3 only Intel Core processors, only 2 M.2 solid-state drive will be enabled, and they will be swapping data at a PCIe 3.0 standard, meaning up to a standard 32 gigabit per second. But couple it with an 11th generation PCIe 4 enabled Intel Core processor, and our 3 sticks will be fully usable and enabled. The CPU fed one will be the only running at PCIe 4 standard, meaning that it will be able to swap data up to a whopping 64 gigabit per second, obviously great for large file access and therefore storage. Obviously, in both cases, our sticks will get really hot really quickly. And MSI stayed consistent with its thermal redesign and came up with thicker than normal heat shields, and I have to say impressively thick thermal pads, giving really good thermal results, far away from any chances to ever thermo throttle. Now, chipset wise, we're dealing with a brand new Z590 chipset from Intel, and the very first thing to say is that despite heavy speculation and Intel all efforts to advertise it as a PCIe 4.0 chipset, well, it really is not. Despite the fact that it can use our 11th generation CPU 20 PCIe 4.0 lanes to feed any components on the board, it does not provide any itself. It still has the same 24 PCIe 3.0 lanes we saw on its Z490 variant, and that's why we got that weird mix of PCIe standards on every Z590 board. Now, is that a bad thing? Well, not necessarily. Since our CPU takes care of all the PCIe 4.0 lanes, our chipset can remain at a cool 6 watts of heat signature, so no need of an active and expensive chipset cooling solution as seen on its rival, the old PCIe 4.0 X570 chipset. But more important than this fake PCIe 4.0 support, the chipset comes with an upgraded DMI link, which provides an 8GB direct link to the CPU, double the bandwidth of its previous generations, and obviously this will allow more bandwidth to chipset-fed components. And even though this is a poorly advertised upgrade, it really is the most important one in my sense, because it really helps to get as much bandwidth out of your motherboard as possible, and the integration of the new USB 4.0 standard, something that content creator will absolutely love. Export-wise, we have 5 PCIe expansion slots, 2 bachelor ones, and 3 PCIe slots with different speeds. As usually, only the first 16 slots can deliver up to 16 full PCIe lanes, so obviously if you have only one video card, this is where you'd want to place it for optimal performances. Now, in a dual GPU configuration, bandwidth it splits into an 8x8 PCIe configurations, hence the metallic reinforcements. The last and naked 16 PCIe slots have been capped at 4 bus speed, not exactly GPU friendly. Now, again, the PCIe standard will vary depending on which processor will be used on this motherboard. With a 10th generation core CPU, all of the PCIe exports will run at PCIe 3 standard with 1 GB per second bandwidth per PCIe lane. But couple the board with an 11th generation core CPU and our 2 first PCIe slots will see their bandwidth double to 2 GB per second per lane. And that is a lot of bandwidth, but to be absolutely fair, we do not yet have video cards on the market today which even go beyond PCIe 3.0 bandwidth level. So if you're gonna go with a single video card, you're not gonna see ever any kind of performance gain, at least for now. It's a great future-proofing element, a great marketing stunt, but that's all it is for now. But in a multiple GPU configuration, it has some heavy benefits because it will allow these video cards to be used at their full potential. Now, a quick last word on that additional 6-pin PCIe plug right here. Now, that's something that MSI has only been adding on a few motherboards on their series, and that will feed extra power to their PCIe slots, which usually are capped at 75 watts and might be limiting some video cards such as the RTX 3090, but I really don't see so many people being able to buy 3090 video cards today, let alone 2 of them. So somewhat of a useless feature in my opinion in the current state of the market. Sorry MSI. Let's quickly note the presence of our usual 6 SATA 3.0 ports able to swap data to that slow bottlenecking but reliable 6 gigabit per second each. Nothing new here. But more importantly, let's move to our back I/O, which does feature a padded integrated backplate, fully expected on such a premium board. And starting from the left, we have a flash bias button, awesome for CPU-less upgrade and recovery, 4 USB second generation plugs, an upgraded HDMI and display port which can both output 4K images at 60 frames per second, and that's a sizable upgrade when compared to previous iteration of this board, and that is easily explained by the fact that the 11th generation of Intel Core processor comes with an upgraded integrated APU, something we should keep an eye on. Next, we have 2 USB 3rd generation plugs with 5 gigabit outputs, 3 USB 3.2 generation with 10 gigabit outputs, and for the very first time on the Carbon, a Type-C dual channel 3.2 second generation plugs, aka USB 4. Yes, Howard Bryan, you were right, it is now called USB 4. Most importantly, something that content creator always crave and will absolutely love by the fact that it will help you get as much bandwidth out of your motherboard as possible. Next, we have a Wi-Fi 6E dual band adapter, another first and a sizable upgrade which allows the motherboard to broadcast on 6 GHz cleaner waves and allow higher bandwidth level. On paper, it said 9 gigabit per second, but I find it a little bit hard to believe. I did not reach beyond 4 gigabit per second, which is already a very nice little upgrade. Next, we have our 2.5 gigabit LAN from Intel, and worth noting, this is a step 3, meaning the 3rd iteration of the i225V Intel LAN codec, meaning less bug and a more stable connectivity. And finally, our 8-channel brand new, very obscure ALC4080 codec from Realtek. And I say obscure because, again, even as of today, there is very little information about its specs online, even on the Realtek website. What we know for sure is that it comes with a 32-bit 384 kilohertz playback instead of the 192 we would find on an S1220. It's not something that you're gonna hear a lot about, See what I did in there? But you'll definitely be able to appreciate this when you're recording. It's going to be a clear sound. It's going to be able to add intelligent noise cancellation technologies to it. So for streamers and gamers out there, this is definitely a plus. And without saying that it's studio recording quality, it really gets close to that, on top of which it takes full advantage of our 6 PCB layers, since left and right audio channel have been traced on dedicated PCB sheets, which really does a great deal to help isolating our audio from any kind of static interferences. Overall, as we've seen on other Z590 motherboards, the Z590 Carbon really did benefit some heavy upgrade, both in bandwidth output and connectivity, which also, I want to say, does go in par with the increased price of the motherboard. So I'm going to give it a very generous back IO kudos to MSI for this. Now, front panel connector wise, nothing new here. We have a couple second generation USB connectors, great for monitoring, one 5 gigabit front panel connector, and our 10 gigabit front panel Type-C. Totally normal at this price range, no surprises here. Cooling wise, we got 8 PWM fan connectors, 2 of which can support fully dedicated water pumps. So more than you need to have a properly cooled, air-cooled, airflow build altogether, but also great for enthusiast builders who are going to go for single or even dual loop custom water cooling solutions. Now, troubleshooting wise, we do have our usual easy debugger to guide us through the main stages of our boot, but we also have, and that is a first on a Carbon series, a QLED screen, which not only refines our troubleshooting adventures with precise error code, but given the ridiculous amounts of power. I mean, remember those 1200 amps and the increased amount of features we have on this motherboard and how more complex it becomes, it makes sense to have it here because so many more things could go wrong, and a QLED screen will be able to save you a lot of time. And MSI being MSI, there is more RGB on this board than you'll find here in a soup served on a French nudist beach. Starting with an RGB strip hidden under our roof, much better looking than on the Z490 version, by the way. Another one backlighting our Carbon logo, and no less than 4 RGB Mystic connectors, 2 of which are addressable. In short, enough light to x-ray my empty brain. Now, in conclusion, at $350 before taxes, the MPG Z590 Gaming Carbon Wi-Fi is $80 more than its predecessor, and truth be told, if you already own a Z490 motherboard as of today, well, I would probably recommend you against the upgrade. The 11th generation of Intel Core processor does enable PCIe 4.0 abilities both on Z490 and Z590 powered motherboards, so basically you'd struggle to see any kind of improvements coming from one to another, and that does apply to all Z490 and Z590 motherboards. But if this is a brand new build or an older upgrade you gotta do, this is different. The MPG Z590 Gaming Carbon is somewhat of an exceptional board, I gotta say. It manages to deliver an unprecedented amount of power, engineering, and features at that price range. Not only did MSI successfully establish the Carbon series into the higher tier market as of today, but they managed to do so staying below their natural competition pricing. Yes, Asus, I'm looking at you. I'll say this, they did not cut any corner, which usually MSI does. Well, in the opposite. The VRM, its blocks, the back IO, but most importantly, its sturdiness, its stability. Coming from a company who had so many thermal and stability issues in their Z490 series, I mean, just remember the Edge or the Gaming Plus. It is really impressive, and I usually expect those kind of boards at more of a $400 to $500 price tag. So, in short, if you are looking for about the best versatile, heavy computer gaming board or computing machine on the market today, well, there's really nowhere else your money wants to be. No, there's not.